Exactly 1 year ago, I took an incredible financial risk and bought the most expensive camera that I have ever owned. This camera was promised to be everything that a growing commercial filmmaker would need, all in one package. This was the Ronin 4D. This camera promised built-in RAW, audio module expansions, an 8K upgrade, but the sad part is it's been a year and none of that has actually happened, and this camera is slowly falling into the abyss. So I want to ask the question, will this camera survive 2023? What's going on, guys? A lot of you have been asking me about the Ronin 4D recently, how I use this thing, do I use my cine lenses with it, how I actually operate it on set when filming commercials. So since it's been a year, I figured I would make a long-term review kind of reflecting on what I've been doing with this thing and giving you my thoughts on the future of this camera as well as the future of this camera with me. So without wasting too much time, this is the Ronin 4D. This is the camera that I use to film most of my commercial work with. And when I say commercial work, I'm usually meaning like the higher budget things we do, things that will go on TV, like these 30-second and 60-second spots, because this camera is just a great solution for a small team like the one I'm working with. And the results are absolutely dynamic. This camera, what I've noticed over the last year is what this camera does good, it does extremely good. And I personally don't believe there is another camera on this market that can give you the experience of using the Ronin 4D as a solo operator or a small teams operator. This is just a very unique experience. And for the work that I've been doing, it's been a very convenient experience. To give you a little bit of backstory, I bought this a year ago when I was filming a lot of driving commercials. I was doing active track on-road filming cars, like some crazy dynamic car footage. And I bought this to make filming that type of footage easier because you can add a built-in transmitter. It has a, separate monitor that lets me sit there, watch, and control the footage. And it was very seamless. Fun fact, I have filmed absolutely zero car commercials that involve driving with this thing. I bought this for a problem that I no longer had. And the big thing was, why should I keep it? And that was the thing. The genuine experience of using the 4D. That was kind of why I kept it around. This camera gets a lot of questions asked about it because it's so unique and so weird. But from a user perspective, I can definitely guarantee and say this has been quite an amazing experience. I want to break this camera down with pros and cons because DJI has promised a lot with this camera and they have barely delivered. Like over the last year, I personally would think this would be a dead camera if it was not for the firmware updates, because when it comes to accessories or when it comes to adding all of the included things that they talked about, they kind of dropped the ball on that part. And granted, there is development of new technology, which is why I'm very hopeful for the future of this camera. But from a person who would be remotely interested, instead of buying what this camera could be in the future, let's talk about the pros and cons of what you're getting today. This isn't going to be the generic pros and cons. If you want that, you can go watch one of the thousands of reviews when this thing first came out. This is going to be a review from somebody who has used this thing almost every single week. And this is some of the more niche things that I've noticed while filming with it. Number one, the image coming out of this thing is exceptionally versatile. This reminds me of the Blackmagic because here I have a 6K sensor that I can push to the max when I need it for commercial work, filming ProRes 4444, or if I just want to film 4K or 1080p, I can save a ton of space because you have the flexibility and the way that this camera interprets the image. Really nice. Even if you aren't pushing the file size to the absolute max, you're still getting a really nice image out of this thing. Being able to swap the lens mount on this thing comes up way more than I ever thought it would, because when I bought this, I had Sony lenses, but now I have a set of PL Cine primes, and having the ability to just swap what mount this thing uses is crazy convenient. In case you're wondering how I use the Cine Primes with this thing, I am using the DZO Octopus adapter. It takes the DX mount, which is the mount that the Ronin 4D comes with, and it swaps it to PL. It creates a little bit of depth, and this adapter is crazy convenient. If you have the counterweight, you can just slap these lenses on it and they just work. In case you're wondering what I mean by convenient when swapping, to swap this lens mount, super easy. All you do is take this off, hit this button, pull that, and now the entire lens mount is off. It is so easy. And I find myself switching back and forth between Sony lenses and my Cine Primes often, because when I'm using my Cine Primes, I'm filming commercial work. And when I'm using my Sony lenses, I'm doing a lot of stuff that just is like run and gun B-roll, stuff that needs autofocus and tracking. And I can do that with the Cine lenses, but it takes so much longer to set up the ability to be able to track focus with Cine lenses. That is something that I have not really dialed in yet. So if I'm using Cine lenses, I'm manually focusing. And if I'm using my Sony Primes, it's autofocus, it's auto tracking. It just works. It's a great balance. It definitely feels good to know that no matter what situation I may be in, I have the ability to swap lenses. And that just works for me because I shoot shoots of different budgets and different situations. So you never know what you're running into. But if I really need to throw some Cine glass on there, I have the ability to do that. If I really need to just run and gun with a 50mm prime, I have the ability to do that. The ability to swap the lens mount is genuinely something that I wish every camera had. I know there's a bunch of adapters, but just being able to just throw something else on there whenever I need it to work, love that. I genuinely do love that. As a one-man operator, most of the time, the LiDAR tracking and the subject tracking on this camera is really, really supreme when it comes to adding dynamic motion to your images. Recently, I filmed a basketball game and I was able to get in the huddle, track the coach, and get some truly dynamic motion with my shots that I wouldn't be able to get if I was by myself with my Sony. It would be like an overhead reaching thing. And once I put this up in the air, I know it's tracked, I know it has the green box, I know it's secure, and I know it's in focus. So as a solo operator, if you're looking to step up into the Cine game, this has been something that has really, really helped me out. And it's really unique having something that produces such a high quality image also have really dynamic movements, something that's just unique for the viewer, and it creates a nice experience. Another pro for this camera is client care. This is a lot because every single shoot, they are talking about this camera, the movement that this camera may add to the footage. They can't put their finger on it, but I know for 100% fact, it's because I'm using this thing. And you can use any camera. Adding dynamic movement is something that comes easy to this, and it's something that came hard to me for other cameras. Having that experience is one thing. One of the most recent things, this happened earlier today. We were hiring talent on set. Talent on set comes and he says, I was very unsure of what I was getting myself into, but I saw your production rig and I knew there was just this comfort that I was dealing with the right people. Presentation is absolutely important. This is overkill for presentation, but this is just a unique experience that people get to have because that guy has been on hundreds of sets. He is an actor, he does stuff, but he saw just the unique camera this was, and he's like, this is different. I haven't really seen somebody have a solo rig that just kind of does everything for him. So the future is kind of in this camera, and I really do like that aspect, but it does get people talking. Another thing about client care is the wireless transmitter option. I know you can add wireless transmitters to any camera, but this is super seamless because when I'm not focus pulling with this monitor, I'm able to hand this off to my producer and say, hey, here's a clean feed. Please look and see if talent is doing the right thing, or if things that are in frame may not need to be in frame. It's just good to have multiple eyes on set, and having this combo really does help ease that process. Now, I could sing this camera's praises all day because it does produce an exceptional image. It is great for a solo operator. But let's talk about a couple of the cons that scare me, because DJI has promised a lot when it comes to this camera and when it comes to this camera system. I'm in the Facebook groups a lot, and I'm watching people post and talk about things that they've been promised for over a year that's still not out yet. And what I would love to say is, when you're buying a camera, you're buying anything in life when it's technology based, you buy what the camera is and do not buy what it could be. Don't buy the potential, buy what it is and benefit from the potential. When I bought this camera, I knew what it was when it came out. I loved the potential of what it could be, but even if it didn't get anything, I still loved what it was. And that was very important. I am very, very scared as an owner of this camera that one day DJI is going to post out and say, hey, we're discontinuing the Ronin 4D because it's too advantageous. Something we thought we could do, but we couldn't. And that is the one thing that really, really does scare me, because as long as this is getting support, as long as they're tweaking the firmware, and as long as they're working, there's still hope. And I still do love this camera, but it does feel like being in purgatory a little bit. I'm leaning one way and then leaning another, because as somebody who owns this camera, it's just a scary thought. But even if they did deem it too advantageous and they stopped updating firmware, what this is right now is really, really good. It's really, really good. It's expensive, but it's really, really good. It has paid for itself over and over, and I'm really happy about that, because that was the risk. As I said, I bought this camera for a problem that I no longer had, and I had to fit this camera into a new mode in my life or sell it. And I'm very happy that it is starting to work out for all of the production work that we do. So my biggest fear is that this camera does not survive the near future. But if it does, and we get audio support, and we get sensor extension support, much like the Sony Venice 2, we get all of these things that work in this camera's favor, this is going to be a small team creative's dream, because it already kind of works for me. And as somebody who's used it for a year, I love getting to use this thing. It does what it does really well. It's a very seamless user experience. And if you haven't rented one or seen somebody who's used one or watched videos on it, I would definitely look into it if you are a small team looking to go for a bigger budget camera. But for now, when it comes to all of those things, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, if you've heard the cons and you are still on board with this camera and you're looking into getting it, I would recommend looking into the Tilta Float. I have the Tilta Float, so when I'm doing these long days where I need like really dynamic movement, the Tilta Float is something that I pair with this often. I actually sold my Easy Rig because the Easy Rig was a little constrictive when it came to this camera, because this whole camera is based on movement and the ease of movement, and the Easy Rig was not that. So Tilta Float is something that I use because it serves as an extension of myself. It's not something that I would deem necessary by any means, but I'm trying to save my back as much as I can, and this camera is exceptionally heavy. So here is the Tilta Float in action. The main reason you'd get something like this is if you wanted more mobility than an Easy Rig, this is where it's at, because this thing takes all the weight of the Ronin 4D off of you, puts it onto your back. You still have the ability to use the handles. You can still get low. You can do whatever you need to. If I need to squat down, I still can. And I'm not limited to the upward motion of the Ronin. I've used this thing a couple times, and what I do recommend is when I get about this far out, you see it starts to lean. I recommend getting the shoulder straps. In fact, walk with me for a second. That's what these are. These are about $70. And as you can see, it's just a set of shoulder straps you put on to keep this thing tight and even take more weight off of you. But yeah, if you're getting a 4D, I would look into getting this kind of stabilizer with it, because it works really, really well. It's probably as close to an Airy Trinity that I've ever gotten, and I will get there one day. But for right now, this works perfectly fine. Also, the Tilta works with any camera and not just the Ronin. We use it with our FX3 build out. I'm planning on using it with the Blackmagic and stuff that I have coming soon. So yeah, it's just a universal investment. Okay, going forward, the future with this camera, there's a few things I want to do that I probably should have done sooner, but the constant use of it, this is just common things that have come up. I'm probably gonna add an external monitor other than the current external monitor, because what I find to do the hardest on this camera is knowing that I pulled focus correctly, because it's kind of hard to see on this monitor, and the focusing tools are relying on the LiDAR, and sometimes that can all be a nightmare because everything is red or nothing is red. So I need to know what's in focus and what's not. Probably gonna add an external monitor to this handle. It doesn't happen too often when it comes to things being out of focus. It's just something that I would like to alleviate in totality. Also, I want a better carrying case. The Ronin 4D comes with this hard-shelled, carrying case to carry it, the 2 batteries and the handles. But you want to carry anything more than that, you are SOL. And it's something that I want because I don't like breaking this thing down. Breaking this thing down is taking off the side handles, and even that feels like too much sometimes. So I would love to get a bigger case. That is something that you may want to budget in. Also, if you are looking into getting something like this, the sad part is cases are like $700 for this thing, and I just haven't done it yet. But in the grand scheme of things, considering how expensive this is, a $700 case does make sense because you want to protect this thing. And I feel like I'm quickly outgrowing the DJI hard shell case that this came with. And lastly, I want to try out more niche lenses. So there's a couple of things I want to try, but there are some lenses that I want to look into, like anamorphic lenses, something that has some weird perspectives. Combine those perspectives with the movement that this thing gives you, and I bet we can get some really awesome shots. So overall, I do think this is an amazing camera. If DJI stopped working on this thing completely, I still think this is a very unique choice, and I don't think it's a bad choice by any means because what it gives you, it does really, really well right now. But if this camera does continue to grow and get support, and we're not just banking on empty promises for products that may exist in the future, not only do I believe that this camera will survive, but this is going to push a lot of companies into this niche all-in-one market. But with that all being said, that's all I have for you today, guys. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you loved it, consider subscribing because I'm bringing you more content just like this every week. So you guys stay safe, you're loved, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.